The latest figures for the deficit and the debt are respectively 88 billion and 1.5 trillion pounds. But in a lecture last night, the Chancellor George Osborne had no truck with such figures. It was all about a vision of a second Tory term. The boast was essentially this: stick with me, and there's no reason why Britain couldn't be the richest major economy in the world by the 2030s and become immune to boom and bust. Is that even remotely feasible? Here's Duncan Weldon.
Who not? Tell me who rock, who sell out in the stores. You tell me who flop, who cop.
This is the life. And in just 15 years, we could all be enjoying it. Or at least something similar. Because the Chancellor says by the 2030s, the UK could be the most prosperous of all the advanced economies. He set an ambitious target.
The case for optimism is strengthening. And if we're willing to take on the vested interests and pursue the right policies with consistency and discipline, there are no limits to what Britain can achieve. There is no reason why Britain cannot be the richest major economy in the world.
In terms of the crucial measure, GDP per head adjusted for prices and exchange rates, the UK currently sits in 5th place amongst the G7 major economies, a tad behind France, and well short of the US's top table position. Getting Britain the international high life in just 15 years isn't exactly going to be easy. But that's not to say it's impossible. Go back 15 years and the UK was in last place. In other words, we have made progress relative to our peers in the past. Still, although the UK has moved up the international league table in the last 15 years, the gap with the US has barely budged. Trying to overtake the US and getting into first place will be quite a stretch.
Duncan Weldon, well, I'm joined now by Danny Dorling, the Professor of Human Geography at Oxford University, and the Business Minister, Matt Hancock. Let's divide this into two areas. Let's talk about whether or not there's an economic reality to this and whether or not, philosophically, it's a good idea. First of all, Danny Dorling, whether or not you agree with the idea, can we do it?
Leading politicians tend to fantasise about these things. So Tony Blair fantasised about the creative industries and said they would make Britain come to the fore and be the richest place on earth. And, of course, that was completely wrong. The country's been slowly, gradually, over the course of 100 years, slipping down slightly because it was the richest country on earth just over 100 years ago. It is highly unlikely that it is going to zoom up to the top. It could do that by bringing in some of the more of the very richest people on the planet and pushing out some of the poor, but it's very, very, very unlikely.
Well, on what calculation? Let's look at, for example, the living standards of a kind of medium-income family in France and Germany. Yeah. How do we compare to that?
We're lower. The median family in the UK is actually on a lower household income than the median family in France and Germany, and that's before you even consider housing costs in this country. So the median, not the median...
So housing costs are much higher?
Housing costs are much higher in the UK, so we're not doing well for the middle. But on GDP per capita, we do much better because we have some very, very well-off people in the country. And that's partly why the US looks so good on GDP per capita, because it has great inequality and a few people at the top with very high incomes, but the middle family in the US is not doing well, and they have to pay for healthcare costs as well.
Well, we've got GDP per capita of 69% of America's position. Is it ever possible for us to overtake America?
It's highly, highly unlikely, and it is not necessarily desirable.
Right, well, let's turn to Matt Hancock. It's a pretty bold claim for the Chancellor to make that we're going to suddenly go from 5th place to 1st place of advanced Western countries.
Well, of course, this is possible. Nobody's saying that it's easy, and certainly not quick. You said that we're suddenly going to go there.
2030s. I mean, what...
2030s,
you're positing the idea
to
that...
25 years away.
Yeah.
But the point is this: there is no God-given right that the United States should be the country with the greatest prosperity of all the major economies. There's no right, actually, that we should be in the top rank but not quite there. But there is an argument that says that if we get things right, if we keep moving in the right direction, then we can get there.
Well,
and should we have an aim like that? Of course we should.
But hang on a minute, you know, the US GDP per capita is 30% more than us. Are you seriously suggesting that in 15 years we can leapfrog over America? I mean, our productivity is very, very poor as it is.
No, our productivity is high, but the Germans is higher.
Exactly.
But
everybody else would have to fail massively for us to overtake them.
No, there is not one pie in the world that gets shared out. You can grow the size of economies. And just hold on a second. You know, the United States of America was a long way behind us. It then overtook us, as you say, over a century. But then in the last few years, we have... Hold on. In the last few years, we have been picking up. We have been overtaking countries. As you saw, we're only just behind France on the one measure you chose. There are lots of different measures of prosperity. And should we have a goal... We'll
be the richest country in the developed world by 2030. That is George Osborne's claim. It's kind of the kind of thing that it was suggested he's kind of Gordon Brown type thing to say that he's suddenly lost his marbles.
Certainly not. Firstly, by the 2030s, so this is over the next few decades, and should we have a goal like that? Of course we should.
It's a good goal to have?
No, because it isn't about people's prosperity.
Of course it is. That's the point.
No. GDP is not even salaries and income. GDP's entire productivity. In the US, an increasing proportion of GDP has been going to pure wealth, not to income. So the average American family...
No, because this is based on...
The average American family has been becoming poorer over the last 30 years as the GDP per head has gone up.
The proposal is not about GDP.
Osborne could
so, hold on.
Osborne's quoted as GDP per capita. He could get his target, and most families in Britain could be worse off.
No, there's nobody...
And that's one of the very, very big worries about this.
Firstly, the proposal is set out in terms of prosperity. You can define prosperity. The people's prosperity.
Everybody's prosperity.
Absolutely, and that it should be shared broadly because...
For the median family?
Don't just... Honestly. The point is this. What is the purpose of an economic recovery? What is the purpose? The purpose is that everybody should be better off, have a better standard of living, have a higher quality of life. That is the purpose. So we often come on these programmes and talk about the economy and talk about GDP and dry things like that. That is the technicalities. But the reality, what really matters, what drives me and what drives us, is that we improve the living standards of everybody in our country.
Isn't it?
And that is the goal, and that's what George set out. You want to improve the living standards of everybody.
You might not agree with the idea that being wealthy per se is a good thing.
Lots of people need their living standards improved.
Yes.
The poorest fifth in this country are in the worst position in Western Europe. So we're actually at the bottom of that league table in Western Europe for the poorest fifth.
But
people at the top are richer.
The aspiration of generally becoming wealthier and the idea that there would be trickle down.
Oh, we haven't had trickle down, and everybody knows we haven't had trickle down.
Well, let me just
answer that. But you can have far better aspirations than wanting to be the per capita highest country on the planet. You can aspire to have security, to get rid of precarity, for the median family to be better off, for the average family to have disposable income to be able to go on holidays. Not for the very rich to get richer, which is what we have seen in this country most recently.
How do you change it from the very rich getting richer and the divide getting wider?
Of course. That is
a bad thing.
Excuse
me. It's a terrible thing when the richest get
Honestly,
richer and the median goes down.
No, just take a break, right? Because the point about this is to improve prosperity for all, for the lowest 20%, for everybody in this country.
And let me give
you one very clear way that we can make this country better off for everybody, and that's to have full employment. And there have been 1.8 million more jobs in the last 4 years. And is there a better way to get a family to be more prosperous, not only now but in the future, than to get them a job? Of course, that is the goal, and that is the purpose of this argument.
Thank you.
Growth in the economy is for something.
Thank you both very much indeed.